it was really hard to just choose one record, sort of one influential, defining record. And then I got to thinking sort of more about the arc, about, you know, your first musical tastes and then where you end up and stuff. So the household I grew up in, we didn't have a lot of records. Like, my dad had a lot of Don Rickles comedy records, and my mom had a few records. And so sort of in preschool time, like ages 3 or 4, my mom would play, there's this Jackie DeShannon record, this one, Put a Little Love in Your Heart. And that, in fact, that song, Put a Little Love in Your Heart, is the one that she just played over and over again. And it's kind of like the first song I remember sharing with someone, you know, like enjoying with somebody, was that song. And every time I hear it, it totally reminds me of my mom. And then when I was about 5 or 6, I had this really cool aunt, Nina, my dad's sister, who was like, she was like the first feminist writer in Montreal for the local newspapers. And she was just like, she was little, I mean, she's like 20, 21, 22, so she was like a bit too old to be a big sister, but she was that kind of archetype. And then she moved to Greece, and so she left all of her records with us. And so it was like, you know, inheriting this wealth of music from her. And like the one that sort of stood out was this one, Hot Rocks, which, I mean, as a kid, it's just like, who are these like Elizabethan fops, you know, like what is Charlie Watts doing? You know, it's just totally, and like the whole thing about the 5 of them and the shadows, you know, and the songs were like, I mean, just mind-blowing, you know, when you're that young. And what's kind of funny is like, I keep on going back to the Rolling Stones, like in like every 5, 6 or 7 years, there'd be like a week when they don't leave my turntable or the car. So by this time I was like amassing a bit of a record collection, and my mom, we'd go to the mall together, which was like totally sucked because it was like grocery shopping and stuff. So the carrot that my mom would dangle over my head was that she would give me $10 every time we go to the mall and let me go to like Discus or A&A Records, Sherman. And it was like, it was like 3 record stores in the same mall, which is also mind blowing. So I would have to go grocery shopping with her, and then I would get to go to the record store and buy something. So I really like the song Lola by the Kinks, right? And it has a reference to Coca-Cola, drinking Coca-Cola. So I totally thought that the song Coca-Cola by The Clash was Lola. And so I was like, oh, Coca-Cola, I know that song. That's the song Lola. So I bought this record by accident. I guess I was 12 at the time. 12. So it had come out like a year and a half before that. And that record, that was like the first record that there was like a dividing line in the sand between everything I listened to before, which was pretty much like classic rock or stuff that was on the current stuff that was on the radio, and that stuff that like I listened to with my parents, you know. And this was like the first record that like kind of was like, oh, this is what the kids are listening to, you know. Now it wasn't my parents' music at all, and so it was like a lot of time spent in my bedroom alone listening to that record. 2 or 3 years later, in grade 8, I was in high school, and we had the coolest art teacher. It was Miss Parnass, and she was super cool because she would let us listen to music while we did art, right? And so everyone brought in cassettes and stuff. But what was really informative about that class was getting to listen to music. And so like, you know, that was in the class that I discovered this record in, right? And then this record too. But the one that really stood out from that grade art class was this one. You know, and this was the arc, right? Like this was clearly not my parents' music. This was really my music, to the point where it was like my parents would almost would refuse to listen to it in the car, you know. But I felt like there was sort of an identity that was formed of like, now this is mine. And that was like a gateway record to like, you know, like this. Another record that I played this in the car once with my parents, and my mom's like, his voice is horrible. Why do you like this? He's so gloomy, you know. And there was part of me that was like, all right, I'm listening to stuff my parents don't like. That's like the echelon, you know. And then And then this record was like super, super important to me a few years after that. You know, and then Jesus and Mary Chain, and then from that, like, and then that sort of brought us to Fugazi and then the 90s and stuff like that. And like, without exception, for me, all of those records have aged really, really well. And like, I listened to a few of them before coming to do this, and I was like, yeah, it's pretty good, you know. And so I don't know what the sort of the thesis and all of that is, but I just know it's kind of interesting, again, being a parent, you know, it's interesting to sort of what music you expose your children to, and then what music they discover by themselves, either because it's completely the opposite of what you've exposed them to or a natural extension of it, you know. So yeah, those are the four that I chose.